running down the half mark. He reels it in at the 15. Cooper Kupp has the catch.
The greatest D tackle ever right here.
It's good. Mike Williams with the grab.
Feeling fresh as hell.
Chargers lead 29-28. The Trojans have won the Rose Bowl.
There he goes. Kashmir Allen, 2 long receiving touchdowns, and now a kick return touchdown. This day belongs to Kaz.
You're listening to the LA Football Podcast.
What's going on, Los Angeles? Welcome into the LA Football Show right here on the LA Football Network. We are everywhere you get your podcasts. We are on YouTube at LAFB Network and every Friday during drive time on 1090, the mightier ESPN Radio. Thank you for making us a part of your day. Joined as always, my co-host, the madman, Jamal Madni. What's up, my brother? How we doing on this fine Friday in Los Angeles?
Happy Friday, Ryan. Doing well. Excited to get on the show and excited to have a good weekend as well.
Yes, the dead season we are in for football, but that doesn't mean the show stops. We got great topics to talk about, which we'll get to here shortly. But first, got to give a shout out. Game 5 tonight, Stanley Cup playoffs. My Avalanche can potentially lock that Stanley Cup first in over 20 years. Are you watching the game, Jamal? I know you're not a big hockey guy, but are you going to turn on?
You've gotten me, sort of into it, so I can't say I'm watching all 3 periods end to end, but I'm definitely, popping in there. And I know we had a text thread with game 4 and it went into overtime and it was such a nail biter. And I remember texting you, I said, I really believe not only does obviously next score win, but I think next score wins the cup. And I think the Avs are set up here, and I think it ends tonight. And I have not experienced you as excited as I have the last couple of days with the Avalanche. So I can't even imagine what's going to happen if and when they complete it tonight.
Yeah, when you texted that, I was like, I'm not responding till after the game because I'll be very upset if Tampa wins this, and that means you're basically belief that Tampa will do the full 4-game comeback. But I got it. I kind of felt that vibe too, just because that momentum shift would have been so great. But anyway, we don't have to dive into all that, but I'm excited about the game. I'm definitely going to be putting some money on the game for my Avs because I do believe that they can get it done tonight, getting back at home in Colorado. That place is going to be electric as it has been all playoffs long. And yeah, I'm going to put my money down at betonline.ag, sponsor of the show. Use the promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV. When you place your first deposit, you get a 50% welcome bonus. So you can bet on the game tonight if you'd like, or as we say every show, all the future bets for the NFL and college you can put down right there. Division winners, Super Bowl winners, MVP odds. I believe I heard from our Rams Brothers show, because they were doing a little segment on it, that Stafford sits like 8th or so in MVP odds. Herbert, I believe, sits fourth or 5th. So Herbert much, I don't know if you say better odds, you would win less, but better odds to win. So if you want to put any down on those 2 quarterbacks, Kupp is somewhere in there. Obviously much harder as a non-quarterback to win the award, but betonline.ag is everywhere you want to go to make that happen. Tell them Ryan and Jamal from the LA Football Network sent you. All right, Jamal, anything you want to add before we just jump into the show today?
No, Ryan, excited. It's, as you said, we're in the heart of summer and, obviously lots going on. We're sort of in that interesting spot before teams are starting to ramp up with training camp and after some of the big kind of recruiting periods in college. So the show must go on. And I think we've got a really fun, exciting debate here today, kind of taking the LA football landscape holistically. So I'm excited to get into it.
Well, give the good people the rundown. I'll let you, that'll be your thing since you did it last show. What are we talking about today?
Well, Ryan, it's going to be a really fun this or that type of segment. And so we've got 8 or 9 different sort of comparisons across the 4 LA football teams. And, we're going to be kind of comparing players, coaches, sort of head to head. And, I'm really excited about that. And then we'll sort of segue into who we believe is the face or the biggest faces in Los Angeles football today. So I'm excited about this.
Yeah, it should be fun debates as we can kind of go back and forth. So with that, let's just jump right into it. And we've got like 9 or 10 this or that situations across pro and college that obviously we want to hear from you guys. So we'll tell you again when the specific debate we want you involved. We'd love you involved in all of them, but it's showing on the bottom line. Text LAFB to 31032 so you can get involved in the conversation. We can hear your thoughts and connect with you. Just a better way with technology nowadays. You might as well connect, and you're listening to us on the screen or in the car, and we'd love to actually have a conversation with you. So text LAFB to 31032 to get involved with that. So let's start with, I think this is probably they're all good, but this might be the most up for debate, I guess, in a way. I mean, not really, but anyway, this or that, Sean McVay or Lincoln Riley, who is I don't want to say better coach necessarily yet, because Lincoln Riley hasn't proved anything yet at SC, but maybe who is the bigger coach in Los Angeles as it stands right now? I'll toss to you first and I'll give my thoughts.
Ryan, this is a tough one, because obviously it makes all the sense in the world to say Sean McVay, coming off of obviously what a terrific run to win the Super Bowl, a Super Bowl champion. He's sort of recognized as the greatest young mind and potentially just offensive mind overall in the game. He just got married in a very epic fashion at the Beverly Hills Hotel to his beautiful wife from the Ukraine. And so, he's got it all kind of rolling right now in terms of just the celebrity status and the success. And then you sort of couple it on the other side with Lincoln Riley, who has a contract just as big, if not bigger than McVay's. SC bought him this sort of beautiful home in Palos Verdes. He's hosting all these big time recruiting parties. You see him very active on social media and Twitter with, the victory sign every time we sort of sign a big recruit. And he seems to really be at the epicenter of so many different conversations. So it's, these are clearly the two biggest coaching stars in LA landscape today, I think overall, regardless of sport.
All sport, yeah.
But I probably give the edge out of respect to Sean McVay for what he's achieved on the field and what sort of the celebrations that have accompanied off the field. But I think it's a lot closer than people realize. So I'm going to go kind of McVay by a hair.
Yeah, I agree. And that's exactly what I was going to say is it's a lot closer. Like any Rams fans listening would scoff at that idea and understandably so. I get it. And everyone who has listened to this show long enough knows how much I love Sean McVay and how great he is. And he's the obvious choice, as everything you just said. I don't need to list all of them, but being not only the Super Bowl champ, but being, when he came to LA, the youngest coach ever hired by an NFL organization, never having a losing season, making the playoffs 4 out of his 5 years, 2 Super Bowl appearances, kind of changing the offensive game as we knew it, kind of taking that Shanahan archetype, but then making it his own and really branding the 11 personnel that became synonymous synonymous with McVay and the Los Angeles Rams, creating the star that was Jared Goff. Obviously there was a downfall, but turned a former number 1 overall pick that was thought to be a bust after his rookie year and turning him into a 4,500 yard thrower every single season, creating Todd Gurley into the star that people thought he could be coming out of Georgia, creating the star that is Cooper Kupp, that was Robert Woods. I was Robert Woods with the Rams, still going to be a star, I think, with the Titans, but really just what he's built with this Rams and is synonymous with LA football. It's an obvious choice, but you look at Lincoln Riley and having done nothing yet in LA, he still has that glow about him. We talked about last episode, Jamal, about what USC football means to this town. And a lot of the younger generation probably doesn't realize that. And that's why they would scoff at it. But USC football was the epicenter of sport for LA for so many years. And then even when the Dodgers became big, the Lakers became big, it was still a USC football as kind of the mecca when it came to true paradigm and true fanhood. And that left for a long time. And now in the 6th month that Lincoln Riley has been here without playing a down of football outside of the spring game at the Coliseum, which had the biggest attendance ever recorded in spring games for USC, he's brought that allurement, that beauty, that poetry back to USC football. And so I am in agreement. I'm going to lean Sean McVay, but if Lincoln Riley wins 10 games this year and wins a Pac-12 championship, I think he will overtake, even if Sean McVay wins another Super Bowl, just because of the history of USC football here. And that's zero disrespect to the Rams, zero disrespect to Sean McVay. But I think it just, people forget how big of a brand USC football is. And now we're seeing that again.
No question, Ryan. And I think, you brought up some fabulous points around the player development piece, right? With Goff, with Gurley, with Kupp transforming Stafford now into a Super Bowl champion. But there is an argument to be made that for his sport and for his environment and context, Lincoln Riley has developed players with as good, if not better, outcomes. If you really go back and see Baker Mayfield, Heisman Trophy winner, #1 pick. Kyler Murray, Heisman Trophy winner, #1 pick. He took Jalen Hurts, who was thought to be, sort of an afterthought in Alabama, getting supplanted by Tua Tagovailoa, turning him into a first-round pick and a starting quarterback in the NFL. And so when you sort of put that together, remember Oklahoma, when Riley was there, 4 college football playoffs, back-to-back Heismans. That was not done in 20 years since Matt Leinart and Reggie Bush. So for his sport, he has achieved on a player development standpoint just as much, if not more so, than the great Sean McVay himself. Obviously, it's different contexts and different challenges. So I agree with you. I think it's McVay by a hair, but there's definitely an argument to be made for Riley right now. And if that success continues, I think that debate is going to get even closer.
Yeah, it's fine. In reality, we're just blessed to have 2 phenomenal coaches,
Absolutely.
Young coaches, faces of the game. And what's even more fun, this is the last thing, so we'll have to move on. So we got like 9 of these. But how fun would it be if Sean McVay does retire in 3 to 4 years, like we all suspect, and Riley takes over the Rams as the new? I mean, I know there's the talk of jumping to Dallas, which I agree with you, makes a ton of sense too for him. But oh man, that'd be a lot of fun if they have that succession plan.
That could very well be the case, and that would be incredible Los Angeles football poetry.
Oh yeah, beautiful. So, okay, so we were both in agreement. Very close, very great debate. But we're both in agreement. McVay is the face right now. Okay, let's do. Let's stick. Well, let's not stick to the pros since both. Let's go with pro one now. Look at the receivers, and we talked before show. There's no point putting up debate with Cooper Kupp. I think we're all in agreement he's the best. So let's look at the second tier now, and this is where we want to get you involved, you listeners. Again, text LAFB to 31032. When you look at Mike Williams with the Chargers and now Allen Robinson with the Rams, you have 2 very, very talented #2 receivers that could probably be #1 receivers in other places. ARob was for basically his entire career with Jacksonville, Chicago. So who do you take, Jamal? This or that? Mike Williams or ARob is the better #2?
This is another really difficult one, Ryan. And, Mike Williams is coming off such a terrific season as a #2, over 75 catches, over 1,100 yards, 9 touchdowns, really sort of a stalwart target for Justin Herbert. And I think the question sort of becomes, who are we comparing Mike Williams to? Are we comparing him to the 2021 version of ARob or the 2020 version of ARob? I think people forget that 2 years ago, Allen Robinson as the #1 receiver with the Bears, over 100 catches, over 1,200 yards, 6 touchdowns, as the #1, not only wide receiver option on the Bears, but arguably the only offensive option on the Bears with Mitch Trubisky as his quarterback. Last year, of course, he took a step back in terms of injuries and production. And my only question with Robinson is, how does he fit into winning football? Because the 1 year that the Jaguars that he was on, that the Jaguars made that run to the AFC Championship game with Jalen Ramsey on the team, Robinson was hurt the whole year. And so Robinson has accumulated a lot of yards and a lot of stats in a lot of losing situations. And so the question becomes, how much of that is sort of empty, non-competitive yards and stats, and how much of that is really true impact? And so for that reason, until I actually sort of see it work on the field in a winning situation, I'm going to go with Mike Williams by a little bit.
Yeah, it's another great debate and super close because you have Mike Williams, who the biggest knock on Williams for me has kind of been the consistency, which I think he kind of shed that this past season and had back-to-back solid years with Justin Herbert. But before that had I wouldn't say tumultuous, but had up and down first 3 years, right? And with Phillip Rivers being the quarterback for the majority of those, and now having Herbert for the last two. But with his size, the speed that he does have, 4.5, 4.3, 4.53 40 time, his catch radius.
Yep.
We saw how important he was in some of those late game stretches, the late game heroics of Justin Herbert, but that doesn't happen without some of those heroic catches from Mike Williams and company there with the Chargers. And then you look at Allen Robinson, who everything you said is absolutely accurate and true, but this will be the first season he really has a competent quarterback, as you alluded to as well. And so it's like, how will we see that skill set now with someone of Matthew Stafford's caliber throwing in the football when Mike Williams has had Phillip Rivers, who is you could debate Hall of Famer. We won't get into that. But now Justin Herbert, who I know we both agree is probably a top 3 quarterback, has had these great throwing QBs to him his whole career. And Allen Robinson has not had that. But that's all hearsay, right? That's all hearsay, hypotheticals. So for now, I have to agree with you. I do lean Mike Williams because of the proven track record the last 2 seasons, the proven track record in this offense. We have to see how Allen Robinson adapts to the Sean McVay offense, which I think he'll be fine. I think he's going to be fabulous. I think he's going to be great chemistry with Cooper Kupp and with Matthew Stafford. But until we see it, kind of similar to the McVay, Lincoln Riley debate, Mike Williams has proven more. And so I'll lean Mike Williams, but it's very close. And they're, again, 2 of maybe the best wide receiver 2s in football.
No question. And again, Ryan, I think you sort of alluded to this. Williams is a little bit younger. He's a little bit bigger. He's a little bit faster, and he has the ability to sort of snare more balls from a catch radius perspective in bigger hands. So, in terms of physical traits, and now kind of getting into, the subsequent years with a Brandon Staley offense too, right? We can talk about competent quarterback on the Allen Robinson side in a great structure and an environment for him to succeed. But now that consistency comes into play for Mike Williams as well. Now it's another year with Staley, another year with an improved and more seasoned Herbert. So I think both of those factors apply to both of those guys. And so I still give Williams the nod because A, I've seen it, and B, the physical traits are there.
Yep. Yeah, I totally agree. So, but great. And I can't wait to see both of them play this year. And it's going to be a lot of fun. So, all right, Jamal, last one before we take the break. So we'll run through this one kind of quickly. We have a couple minutes. Let's jump back to the college side and let's look at the running backs. I think there's no debate from either of us, or I would hope anyone, even USC fans, that Zach Charbonnet is not the best running back in Los Angeles, probably the best running back in the Pac-12 and arguably a top 3 running back in the country. I mean, I know we're more bullish than the rest of the country is, but they're just because they haven't seen him play every game like we have. But we wanted to take a spin on it, and who has more production, whether we can say yards or touchdowns, I'll let you decide, but more production, Charbonnet versus the pair of Austin Jones and Travis Dye.
Yeah, Ryan. I mean, I see a massive year for Charbonnet as the lead back for UCLA. I think 1,300 to 1,500 yards and 15 touchdowns, I think, is all on the table moving forward. But what's interesting is when you look at a Lincoln Riley offense historically, A, he always likes multiple backs, and B, there's actually a pretty heavy emphasis on running the ball inside the red zone when the field shrinks and some of the spread concepts in college go away. And so for that reason, I'm going to take the pair over Charbonnet on the touchdown side of things. I think the pair is going to be about comparable with Charbonnet on the yard side of things, but I'm taking the pair because both Austin Jones and Travis Dye have a nose for the end zone. We were talking about this. Travis Dye against UCLA last year with Oregon, 4 carries, 7 yards, 4 touchdowns. Austin Jones was the primary weapon for Stanford anytime they got inside the 25-yard line even.
tore
really
apart USC.
the ball. Yeah, exactly. And we saw that against SC as well. So for that reason, I'm going to take the pair on the over with the touchdowns. And, the pair and Charbonnet are going to be very comparable with yards. But Charbonnet is going to have a massive year alone and be invited and be in the consideration for the Doak Walker Award.
I want to disagree with you, Jamal, at some points. We can have some parity on this show, but I just can't, especially for this one, because I totally agree. Charbonnet far and away is the better lone back, and I agree that I think the production level in terms of yards is going to be very close, because I think Charbonnet has the potential to be in that 1,500-yard range, depending his utilization, which will be a lot heavier this year than it was last year. And I think the combo of Jones and Dye will be in that 12, 13. I mean, each of them getting around 700 yards each is very I think recognizable. But in terms of touchdowns, I could see Dye and Jones both having 8 to 9 each touchdowns, which puts you at, 16, 17, 18. I think Charbonnet will be closer in that 10 to 12 range. Could push it closer. I mean, we saw him have a huge game against Hawaii to open the season, but I mean, we'll see really how it plays out. So very close. We can touch on it again at the back end of the break if we want to start with that. But let's take a quick break for all our 1090 listeners. Make sure to stay tuned. This is the LA Football Show. We'll be right back at the bottom of the hour. All right, so welcome back. Before we jump into the next one, Jamal, looked like you wanted to say one more piece on the Charbonnet Dye Jones debate.
No, I think that's exactly right, Ryan. And I think this is where sort of the mathematician in me comes out a little bit. I think if you expect SC to be in the low 40s per game on an average perspective, that's going to be roughly 5 to 6 touchdowns a game. And when you sort of factor in 12 regular season games, you're looking at between 60 and 70 touchdowns on the season. And so even if Caleb gives you 40 touchdowns, 40, 45 total touchdowns, there's still another 20 touchdowns to 25 touchdowns out there that need to be accounted for. So you could definitely see both Dye and Jones get 10 each when you talk about kind of short yardage situations. So I think we're on the same page there in terms of touchdowns.
Yeah, that's there's the data that I wanted to hear from you. So there's my data, guys. So yeah, we're in agreement there. So all right, let's jump back to the pros. Another one, we'll see if we agree again. And this is another fun debate that probably on paper seems more skewed, but I think when you break it down more, it's less apparent than fans would immediately jump to. And that's if we look at take this or that, Jalen Ramsey of the Rams and newly signed Charger JC Jackson. Jalen Ramsey has been and probably is the thought by many the best corner in football. But JC Jackson has been very strong with the Patriots, has led the NFL in interceptions, now comes to a Brandon Staley system that is very favorable of the defensive backs, similar to what the Rams run, with Raheem Morris. And so it's a fun debate. So I'll let you start. I know, I don't know. I'll hear your thoughts. Who do you got, Ramsey or Jackson?
Ryan, I may be the contrarian here, but I'm going with JC Jackson. And, I think we talked a lot about NFL leader in interceptions. I think he's been sort of top 5 in terms of defensive player of the year consideration the last couple of years, and everything that he sort of meant to the Patriots in terms of Belichick's scheme that really starts in many ways in the secondary. But I have a bit of a sour taste in my mouth with Jalen Ramsey at the end of last year. There's sort of a principle in behavioral economics that you remember experiences that peaked out and what were the most recent experiences. And so for me, the most recent experience with Jalen Ramsey was watching him get burned by Mike Evans against, in that Bucs game, and just getting crushed on those go routes. And frankly, getting crushed in the Super Bowl in the one-on-one matchup with Jamar Chase. And, we've kind of talked about this before. If Donald's a split second late on Burrow on that 4th down, Jamar Chase was wide open. And, Jalen Ramsey was literally on the floor at the 23-yard line, who would just basically watch Chase walk into the end zone. And so in the biggest of games, in the brightest of lights, when it was sort of the head-to-head matchup, alpha versus alpha, Ramsey came up very short. And so that is something that I just can't evade in my mind right now. And he's going to have to reprove it to me moving forward in the 2022 season. And so for those reasons, I'm going JC.
Yeah, I hear you. And this will be the one where we can have a little disagreement, but not a very disagreement, because I agree with all those points. But I will look more at the full body of work where Jalen has been that lockdown corner for many years now, has been an all-pro many times where JC Jackson has not. Last year was his first Pro Bowl appearance with the Patriots. And as great as JC Jackson has been and kind of the rising star that came out of nowhere, a former JUCO product that came into the NFL, whereas Jalen Ramsey was always in the spotlight at Florida State, 4th overall pick, and had to live up to that hype, which he has, I think. And so that's the fun that JC Jackson is, and why I love the signing with the Chargers and having him opposite of Asante Samuel Jr. makes them maybe the most dynamic pair in football in LA specifically, because the Rams don't quite have that same level with two guys. But I think Jalen Ramsey, for me, has proven enough over his career. I agree with you. Definite letdown in the big shining moments. But he's had other big shining moments where he's proven, where I don't know if we've seen JC Jackson in a shining moment yet, because he is so new, only 4 years in the league. His last 2 have been the very highly productive years as a starter. But that was, a Patriots team that missed the playoffs in his first season in that production, and last year got bumped early. And so I don't think we've seen him in those big moments yet. And so because I've seen Jalen Ramsey be productive in big moments, I know the letdown last year, but I'll lean Ramsey because of what he has proven over his tenure. But it's closer than many would seem on paper, because I know Rams fans would scoff at that. And I think a lot of Chargers fans, though, would lean JC Jackson.
Yeah, Ryan, I think it also brings up an interesting debate of, are we looking at body of work, or are we looking at moving forward also? And I think that there's, and I think you and I are seeing it slightly differently of body of work versus moving forward. I would also argue that I don't know if I've ever seen Jalen Ramsey shine in a big moment, because even in that run with the Jaguars and when they ultimately lost to the Patriots, he had a very bad game in the AFC Championship game, even in that game. And he was getting burned by some pretty mediocre Patriots receivers as well in that game, and getting tough in some of these matchup crosses with Gronk. And it just, the game was actually, everyone forgets, was in the Jaguars' hands. They were up 10 in the 4th quarter of that game. The game was actually in the hands of the secondary, because you knew Brady was going to have to throw the ball in the 4th quarter, and they just let Brady be Brady and ultimately lose that game. It wasn't Bortles who lost them that game. It was the defense. And so, again, Ramsey's a great, there's almost sort of a James Harden feel to Jalen Ramsey, where he accumulates all these stats and all these accolades in the regular season. But when it's time to show up when the lights are on, he got saved, plain and simple, by Donald and Kupp and his running mates in this playoff run.
Yeah, I hear that. So we'll see how it goes going forward, and we'll see how JC plays in those big moments, because he hasn't had the opportunity to do that yet. All right. So first we disagree on there. So let's jump back to college, and let's look at the recruiting game. Everyone gives Lincoln Riley the credit, as rightfully so. Everyone talks about, UCLA and the lack of recruiting under Chip Kelly, which has now kind of shifted a little bit. And when you look at the true recruiting prowess and the men behind the scenes, you have to look at Dante Williams for the Trojans, who is considered by many one of the greatest recruiters in all of football. And then you look at Ken Norton Jr., newly hired linebacker coach for the Bruins, that kind of we think may be the DC in waiting here for the future, but obviously a highly touted recruiter as well. So this or that, who do you take in the recruiting game, Dante Williams or Ken Norton Jr. of the Bruins?
Ryan, this is a really interesting one. And again, it kind of comes to, are we looking at body of work, and are we looking moving forward? Obviously, in terms of body of work, Dante Williams is not only the best recruiter that USC has had since Ed Orgeron, but has been the best recruiter in the Pac-12 for the better part of a decade. Mm-hmm. He was the ultimate linchpin for SC's campaign to take back the West. He was the ultimate linchpin that was the reason why Oregon went ahead of USC when he was on that Oregon staff. Tremendous pipeline into the high school as well as the junior college system in Southern California. Very charismatic, knows his stuff. But what's interesting is, I think moving forward, the answer here is Ken Norton Jr. because of Chip Kelly's deficiencies. As a recruiter, I think Ken Norton Jr. is going to play a much more central role to UCLA's recruiting strategy and lean on the experiences of being the only NFL player to have 3 straight Super Bowls, leaning on the experiences of being on Pete Carroll's staff during the Leinart and Bush years, being on Carroll's staff during the Legion of Boom years, and sort of putting that accumulation of experiences with his personality to the table, I'm afraid that Dante is going to now get sidelined a little bit with Riley and with the overall sort of ecosystem of NIL and the Boulevard Exchange and State Outed and all of these things now that are going to be used as tools for SC, I think is going to mitigate Dante Williams a little bit. And I think Dante Williams ultimately is going to go to a place and leave SC in a couple of years where he is kind of a centerpiece again. So I think it's more in terms of opportunity. I think Ken Norton Jr. moving forward will mean more to UCLA recruiting than Dante Williams will mean to USC recruiting moving forward. But that doesn't take anything away from Dante Williams being one of the great recruiters of the 21st century.
Yeah, it comes down to, I guess, how we phrase it and kind of the thought process. And if it's who is strictly the better recruiter, I think we would both agree probably Dante Williams, especially when you look at the history, what he's done, the track record, how long he's been doing it. But yes, and I agree with you yet again, when you say means more for their program moving forward, it's far and away Ken Norton Jr. because of the deficiencies that UCLA has had and Chip Kelly has had with recruiting, whereas Lincoln Riley is known as a power recruiter. Like he has the track record at Oklahoma. Obviously, he took over a great program from Bob Stoops, but we've seen since he's come here what he can do. Dante Williams was the face of recruiting under Clay Helton and past regimes, and he was the reason why they were at least somewhat competitive and had a Rose Bowl win, whatever it was, 4 or 5 years ago. That was because of him and his recruiting when they brought him down from Oregon and were able to steal him away. But he, like you said, and I won't spend too much time on it because you said everything perfectly, is he won't need to do that as much anymore because of all the stuff USC has now built with Lincoln Riley, all the background noise that they have. It's kind of like it's back to recruiting itself, whereas he had to sell it before. Now he doesn't have to, and it'll sell itself. Whereas Ken Norton Jr. is going to go and sell UCLA and get in those living rooms and get those kids to commit and be a Bruin and come to Westwood. And so he will mean more to that program recruiting than Dante Williams. So I agree with you 100%. But shall we move on? In agreement again. Back to the pros. Let's go with defensive minds, right? And Brandon Staley, great defensive mind, defensive coordinator for 1 year with the Rams, led that unit to being the #1 defense in the league. We saw great numbers from the secondary. We saw Jordan Fuller, who was a 6th-round pick, become a star and starting safety in that system. Goes over to the Chargers after 1 year, becomes the head coach. Obviously, the defense struggled, but it's like he's trying to get his personnel in place. It's his first year as a head coach. There's a lot of things moving. Raheem Morris comes in for the Rams, takes care of the defense. There was a lot of, I don't know, it didn't change the full defense, but there was a lot of growing pains in those kind of first few weeks. A lot of fans wanted him fired immediately, which I thought was unbelievable. But then we saw the defense kind of molded, end up being a Super Bowl champion. We've heard since then how coaches speak so highly of Raheem, and he's going to be a great head coach again one day. So here's the question, this or that, who's the better, we won't say coach, just defensive mind, Brandon Staley or Raheem Morris?
It's so funny, Ryan, because the narrative over the last 12 months everything has been about Staley's aggressiveness on 4th down and sort of reinventing counting cards at the blackjack table when it comes to sort of field position odds and time of possession odds and number of possessions in a game. So much of the conversation and the controversy and the excitement around the unorthodox behavior of Staley has been on the offensive side. So we sort of tend to forget sometimes that he, has defensive roots as a result of that. I actually think the answer here, surprisingly, is Brandon Staley. And I think because for exactly the reasons that you laid out, he led the Rams to be the #1 unit in football in his year there and really sort of set that foundation for Raheem Morris moving forward. And I think Raheem Morris also had the benefit, they both did, obviously, of having the great Aaron Donald, but now Raheem Morris also had the added benefit of having Aaron Donald with Von Miller and just, what that sets things up for. I mean, it's almost the equivalent in basketball of having Steph Curry and Klay Thompson. When you just have sort of that level of shooting, that level of pass rush, it just becomes such a logical, sequenced, linear, strategic game to play defensively, where you can just sort of play off of that so well. So I think that there's a year of proving, and it's a little bit of a proving ground now for Raheem Morris to show that without having both those aces in the hole, obviously Wagner coming in provides a different dimension, but can he do it now with a little bit different of a personnel where the strength of the pass rush is just not as clear and evident as it was the year before, where you could just play off of that defensively. So for those reasons, I think Staley paving that road for the Rams, I give the edge to Staley.
So I'm gonna cop out on this, and I'll tell you why. But I'm gonna take the edge. I'm gonna say it's equal at this point. I think they've proven that it's equal at this point in just defensive mind, right? And you look at Staley, and I won't try to take too long-winded, but you look at Staley, where he comes from, playing quarterback in college, going to John Carroll as a coach, and then coming up, being hired by Vic Fangio and his staff, and kind of becoming a Vic Fangio disciple, who is considered one of the greatest defensive minds in all of football, being a linebacker coach for him for 3 seasons, and then getting the immediate jump to DC, where he took those principles and created the best defense in all of football. And what that defense was predicated on was the adjustments that he was able to make in game, which shows the beautiful mind that he is defensively, of how he can take his offensive prowess from past years and see what an offensive doing through 1 or 2 quarters and adjust accordingly to make his defense and manipulate the defense to then manipulate the offense. And that's the beauty that is Brandon Staley. And that's what we saw. And then we see him go to the Chargers, and because of a different personnel, have to kind of shift his line of thinking again in defensive play calling and do things differently when he didn't have the Aaron Donalds on the defensive line, that they didn't have the linebacking core that necessarily played exactly how he wanted in stopping the run, which was so inefficient last year, and had to really rely on the secondary a lot more than maybe he had to with the Rams. So that's the beauty I saw in Staley. You look at Raheem Morris, who comes from a Tampa 2 system historically, goes to Atlanta, becomes a wide receivers coach for Atlanta, and coaches the offense for a year under Kyle Shanahan, and has that then offensive prowess, then comes to LA to take over Brandon Staley's system and says, I've never done this system, but I'd rather take me, one person, learning it instead of reteaching 11 guys a new system in the Tampa 2 system. So he takes his defensive prowess and now says, I'm going to teach myself all these different schemes and tactics. I'm going to put a little flavor on it, little Raheem Morris, flavor and different, spices to it. But then we're going to build and grow and adapt together through the season. And we're going to go and guess what? Win a Super Bowl. Yes, we had the star power to do it, but I learned and my defensive mind came. So long-winded answer of saying, I think they're both phenomenal offensive minds. I think they're both phenomenal coaches. Brandon Staley is one of my favorite coaches on football. I think Raheem Morris probably has one more year with the Rams, and he's going to get a head coaching job next year. And so I'll take the cop-out answer and say they are equal defensive mind.
Right. I think it's a great point. It is a cop-out answer, but it is a very valid one. There's no question about that. I think it's a bit of a proven year for both this year. Truthfully, I think, Staley to be able to sort of build, I think the thing that's sort of holding the Chargers back a little bit now moving forward is I think the offensive weapons are in place to be one of the most explosive offenses in football. I think the Chargers' ultimate success now is depending on whether they're a playoff team, a deep playoff team, a true Super Bowl contender, is going to be determined on the defensive side of the ball. Can they just get enough stops defensively to let Herbert do his thing? And so I think Staley needs to really sort of revamp that sort of defensive thinking directly into the Chargers for this year. And Raheem Morris, of course, now with the challenges of not having Von Miller to sort of accompany Aaron Donald, the challenges of being the defending champion, getting everyone's best punch, and just being so, I think, exposed on film, right? When you make a deep playoff run and folks can really sort of study dependencies even more so. There's more film on the Rams than any other team, right? Because they had this run. So having to come up with, the counters to the variations and the spices, as you called it. So I think it's going to be a very interesting year for both, but very compelling nonetheless.
Yeah, I just love them both as coaches, and that you can tell what players say about their coaches, and that speaks the volumes. And it's not a lot of coaches out there get trashed by their players, but I don't hear as many as I do with Staley and Raheem, who are just beloved by their players, and not just beloved in terms of the style of coaching, but beloved in terms of like they made me a better player because of how smart they were and how smart they can teach the game of football and the X's and O's standpoint. I mean, hearing Jalen Ramsey talk about Brandon Staley saying best coach I've ever had, and then in come Raheem, and now he's saying, Raheem's one of the best coaches I've ever had. Like, it's insane how smart these guys are and have challenged me to be a better player, which is what you want from a coach. A lot of these players, I mean, let's be real. They know a lot more than their coaches. I mean, they're stars for a reason, right? So if your coach can't challenge you as a player, then what are you even doing? And I think there's two great ones in Staley and Raheem Morris. And we'll see the adaptation this year as the Chargers defense from a personal aspect is very different than it was last year. And the Rams defense from a personal aspect will be very different than it was last year as well. So it'll be fun to see kind of the beautiful minds kind of go into this. And so I'll take the cop out there, but they're both a lot of fun. So of course, Jamal, we're going to continue this in podcast form, but of course we're running out of time per usual. Once we get chatting, it's just, it's so fun. So for all of our 1090 listeners, on the Mightier ESPN radio, go ahead and you guys can pop over to listen to the rest. We have a few more topics. We also want to talk about, kind of the faces of LA overall. We did our Mount Rushmore last episode. That's just overall throughout the times of these franchises. Who's the four faces? But we're going to just go on current players, like who, when you are in Los Angeles, are the faces of LA football. So we will get into that on the rest of the podcast. But for all those listening on radio, thank you for tuning in. Jamal, if you want to give a little salutation to all of our radio listeners out there on 1090, go for it.
Everyone for listening, and hopefully you enjoyed the conversation. Have a wonderful, safe weekend. First weekend of the summer. Go enjoy the beach, enjoy some barbecues, enjoy your family, and we'll see you again next week.
Yeah, and one little fun announcement here. I won't drop the date, but soon here, hopefully this will be good news for you listening, but the LA Football Show will be going from 1 hour to 2 hours on Fridays, starting here soon. So we will have much more time to dive into all four of our teams. Perfect timing for the season, as now we can devote more time to each team and give you plenty more content for these great LA football teams. So for Ryan, or I'm Ryan, for Jamal, this is the LA Football Show. Thank you all for tuning in. Again, tune in over to LAFBnetwork.com for the rest of these segments. All right, Jamal. So that being said, let's continue down, and we don't have to spend a ton of time, but I didn't want to just end it and not get to these last three, because I think they're a lot of fun. And then we wanted to talk about our faces of LA, like we previewed in the intro. So moving on now, jumping back to college, and this is going to be a really interesting one. Better athletic director, Mike Bohn or Martin Jarmond? Both come in very similar times. Both we see kind of big shifts, not necessarily on UCLA in terms of coaching, but definitely a seismic shift in terms of how they operate, some brand partnerships, some more TV and media recognition. And then at USC, obviously a huge shift in just the way the football team is run. But we've also seen some good things, in terms of track and field, in terms of swimming. I mean, I didn't bring up volleyball with UCLA. I mean, overall sports in general, obviously the AD is in charge of. So tough question, but who are you taking? Better AD?
Really tough one, Ryan, because I think they've both had exceptional years the last couple of years, and both since coming in. Bohn came in a few months before Jarmond did, and obviously, Bohn's track record speaks for itself here in terms of ultimately the hiring of Lincoln Riley and what that meant from a transformational perspective to the football team. The beach volleyball team has won a couple of national championships, and SC's been sort of very competitive across the board. Jarmond, on the other side, had to really inherit a difficult situation from a budgetary standpoint, and the legalities associated with the fallout of the Under Armour deal, was able to sort of solidify the Jordan brand, rebrand UCLA, and really kind of take the social media presence of himself and UCLA athletics to the next level. Obviously, the basketball team had that epic Final Four run. Softball has been in the College World Series, and there's been sort of holistic, sort of excellence across the field there. I think for all of those reasons, I'm going to give the edge to Jarmond because I think he's got to deal with a lot more. And, UCLA plays half a dozen more sports than USC does. People sort of forget that. And I think that, combination of UCLA's sort of unique challenges, both in terms of having to sort of deal with the chancellor's office, the UC Regents, the state, all of these other entities sort of really impact what Jarmond can do, whereas Mike Bohn has a lot more autonomy in his job, and he can sort of call the trustees and call the top boosters and really kind of get things done. And I think with Bohn, I think similar to sort of the Dante Williams, Ken Norton Jr. argument, I think it was really ultimately the board of trustees and President Folt unlocking the willingness to sort of open up the checkbooks to the boosters, along with having a really strong chief of staff in Brandon Sosna, who's now going to go and become director of football administration at the Detroit Lions. Obviously, Bohn gets credit for hiring Sosna, but I think the environment around Bohn was set up for success to go get this sort of home run hire in Lincoln Riley, whereas I think Jarmond has to sort of pave more of his own road and deal with a more complex organization, frankly. I think UCLA is a more complex organization than SC is. And for those reasons, I think I give the edge to Mr. Jarmond.
Both ADs are phenomenal ADs. They were both slam dunk hires, getting Bohn from Cincinnati and obviously getting Jarmond from Boston College, where they started building their careers. And we saw what Bohn did building Cincinnati into the powerhouse that he is. I mean, he's the one that built that. I believe he had some time at the University of Colorado as well before that, if I'm not mistaken. Yes. But so Bohn has been fantastic. And I think what I've loved so much about his tenure, and obviously this is a football show, so there's a lot more that goes into it, but looking specifically at football, is the obvious one is getting Lincoln Riley and getting him here. But like you said, basically the board went to him and said, here's a blank check, make it happen. And Brandon Sosna, who you already alluded to, was a huge part of that. So we'll see kind of how Bohn operates without Sosna now as his right-hand man. But that makes things a little easier when you can just have a blank check and go do that. And you don't really have to report on it, right? Because you're a private institution. So we still don't even know the exact figures of how it happened. What I've loved that Bohn's done is he's brought USC back into the current times, right? USC seemed to forget what years we were in. Like, they didn't operate in the social media world. They were real behind the times in production value. They were just really living on this lineage and history, which is so great, but they were just relying on that. And since Bohn has been here now with Boulevard Studios and now these new NIL projects, he's brought USC back to the modern times. And now they're becoming like paving the way for stuff to be done. They're being back to where we are the Hollywood school. We need to act like Hollywood. So I love that he's done that. I give him all the credit in the world. But that being said, I agree with you. Martin Jarmond is, as of now, right now, the better. Again, they're so close because of what he has to deal with, because the difficulties it is as a public university at UC, because of the challenges with building a program without the unlimited. But I know UCLA has phenomenal money and all the accolades, and it's different.
USC football money is a different bit of money than UCLA football money. It's just more people care about USC football relative to the alumni base than UCLA football relative to their alumni base. And football is the crown jewel of the athletic department. And really, in many ways, the crown jewel of the university as the glue that ties the alumni together. And so when you sort of have that inherent cultural support kind of built in, and the Trojan family that is so exceptional built in, it makes your job easier. We got to give them credit for executing on it, because the athletic directors of the past, Lynn Swan, Pat Hayden, Mike Garrett, couldn't. Yeah. They also had all of those resources in terms of school spirit. But I think President Folt sort of allowing the checks to be unlocked, I think Rick Caruso allowing the checks to be unlocked has really made Bohn's job a lot easier and more clear and direct. Whereas Jarmond has to deal with the academic restrictions of players needing to be 3.0 GPA and above, not having that historical culture of football built in, where all the alumni just want to donate to football, and having to do more with less and really taking more targeted shots on goal, having fewer super boosters that he can sort of talk to and think through problems in terms of kind of hiring and big strategic movements, and also just the overall kind of state environment, where again, you have to deal with Sacramento, you have to deal with the UC Regents, you have to deal with the Chancellor's office, and all of these things that go into it. I think Jarmond has been sort of uniquely positioned. And I think the one thing I love about Jarmond is his accessibility. He's out there. He's on Instagram. He's on Twitter. You see him. You see the transparency where he's at all of these different sports. He sort of opens up his family to the world in this very beautiful way. Bohn, for as great as he is, he doesn't have social media. He's still a little bit of kind of an ivory tower guy. And so for those reasons, I think Jarmond by a hair.
Yeah, you hit the last point I was going to bring up, because everything you said, and we're in agreement there. And what Bohn has done in bringing USC back into the forefront is great. What Jarmond has done from an athletic director standpoint is he has changed the envision of an AD, and he is the new modern AD that, as you just alluded to, is present, is hyping the crowd up, is bringing college game day to campus, is getting kids out there at 4 a.m. doing donut runs and filming it and getting on social media, is at the Rose Bowl for every football game. I'm not saying Bohn isn't at every football game, but he's in the crowd, hanging out, getting selfies with students. And so that obviously needs to translate to success and to working the budget and doing all that. But we've seen in a short time, he has been able to do that to some regard and will continue to do that. And so by being the face of the university, he's also been successful in doing the things he needs to do from a business standpoint. And also wouldn't even bring up the signing of the Jordan brand was huge after, after the whole Under Armour deal went defunct and seemed like a really bad deal. And they wanted out because they didn't believe in the UCLA brand. And he goes, all right, well, we don't have Under Armour. Let's go get a better brand. And let's go
the other way around, actually, just to be really clear there. It wasn't that Under Armour didn't believe in the UCLA brand. It's that Under Armour made promises that they couldn't keep. And ultimately, the financial stability of Under Armour is in serious question. And they sort of misrepresented what their financial strength was in the deal with UCLA. So I just want to be very clear there. And I think the other piece, and we'll go on to the next topic there, Ryan, is, it's sort of the difference. Bohn, to me, both successful. So let's lay that out there. But Bohn feels like a new CEO coming into sort of an existing company that was great. Like Ford got a new CEO, or Microsoft got a new CEO, or Boeing got a new CEO, and this corporation is fresh and new, and there's a new momentum. Jarmond feels like the tech entrepreneur that's building, a company from scratch. The early years of Zuckerberg, or, the Elon Musks of the world, where he's sort of paving his own road. And I think that challenges on both sides, both archetypes can be equally successful, but it's you have to sort of acknowledge that it's harder to be that entrepreneur. And when you're successful as that entrepreneur, I think it means more. Yeah,
I agree. So both great, but we both lean a little bit Jarmond, and love what they're building in both USC, LA, and Westwood as well. So, all right, 2 left here. We'll roll through these 2 fairly quickly. Last one for the pros, and let's look at the backup running backs for both the Chargers and Rams. Both rookies coming in, both mid-round picks. You get the Chargers getting Isaiah Spiller from Texas A&M, and the Rams getting Kyren Williams out of Notre Dame. Who are you leaning toward without seeing any production in the pros yet? But we have obviously their college tape.
Yeah, and Ryan, we talked about both of these guys extensively with Will Decker on Draft is in Session. Spiller shared the backfield at Texas A&M. He was kind of more of that undersized thumper. He's sort of a mid 4.5, 4.6, 40 guy, but sort of a lower center of gravity. Really hard to bring down as a result of that. Back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons at Texas A&M really sort of brings a lot to the table in terms of in between the tackles. And because of his size and his sort of low center of gravity, he's hard to bring down, but B, it's tough from a linebacker perspective to get eye level with him. And so he can kind of get lost in, the scrum and then sort of take a burst for another 15, 20, or go all the way and hit the home run. And so he brings a very unique element there that, potentially can complement Austin Eckler really well. I think Kyren Williams, feature back at Notre Dame, over 1,200 yards, lots of big games. Again, lower center of gravity type guy, 6'1", 215. I think, though, that Kyren Williams has an opportunity to start, at some point in the season. I think there's still a lot of question about Cam Akers in terms of durability coming off the ACL, as well as just production. He didn't look great in the playoffs with the fumbles and so forth. So I'm going to give the edge to Kyren Williams because I think there's a scenario that by mid to late October, Kyren Williams could be the Rams feature back. Whereas I think in Miller's cases, he's very clear the change of pace guy to Eckler.
Yeah, it's another close one because I think they're both. I think they're both phenomenal draft picks. I love their situations. We obviously, I think, all agree, and this is why this wasn't in the debate, that Austin Eckler is young question number one back out of all the backs in LA over the Rams guys, just because of what he's.
It's remarkable. I've never seen a player get 20 touchdowns and it'd be talked about less than. I mean, it's arguably the most underrated player in the NFL. Really.
Yep. Yeah, you're 100%. And unfortunately, he's on the wrong side of 27 now, which there's always a huge drop off in production just historically from running backs once they hit that 27. So we'll see if he's able to kind of defunct that this year, which I believe he can. Just always keeps his body. So right now, saying other guys don't, but he does a little different regimen and whatnot, especially for his size. But when you're comparing these two, again, it's so close. And I think they both are so complementary to their football teams. Kyren Williams is a phenomenal pass blocker, which is so important in the Sean McVay system alongside with Matthew Stafford, which again, I think will give him an edge to eventually be the starter. I agree with you. My concern with him, and it's talking with Sean McVay, it sounds like it won't be an issue. He'll be ready to go for training camp, but obviously, broke a bone in OTAs. And so already had surgery and is in a cast, but luckily it happened early enough that I think will be good. But when we have the narratives of Rams running backs not being able to stay healthy, it's unfortunate when in no pads and no contact, your rookie running back already gets a broken bone. And so for that,
though, Ryan, it felt like a bit of a fluke injury. Ligament is where things get very dangerous. Exactly. So, Bohn, it felt like a bit of a fluke, but I hear you.
Yeah, no, but I agree. I've said that a lot with Drake London because I was like, oh, is there an injury history? It's like bone breaks are different than soft tissue stuff where that just becomes the norm. If you continually are tearing or tweaking or this, you have injury history. Broken bone is like that. You just got a bad hit and that happens to anyone. So I want to lean Spiller just because there's not that injury concurrent right now. But I think I agree with you, the fact that Kyren Williams can become the starter like as early as week 1 if he's healthy through training camp, because again, Cam Akers is still kind of nursing an injury. Darrell Henderson didn't participate in OTAs or mini camp because he's nursing an injury. I think Kyren Williams could end up being the guy that kind of breaks this thing open for the Rams running game. And because of the production we saw at Notre Dame and coming from the prolific program that is Notre Dame, and Brian Kelly, who obviously is no longer there, but he played for him, and Spiller, who we know is the unquestioned backup at this point and may not even be RB2 if he can't beat out Larry Roundtree or Joshua Kelly, which I think we both think he will, but it's not a foregone conclusion. Whereas I think it's a foregone conclusion that Kyren Williams will at minimum be RB2, will probably split carries, and potentially can be RB1 very early on. So yes, I'll lean Kyren Williams as well, but both are going to have phenomenal careers here in LA.
For sure, Ryan. And it's remarkable. What we're 7 or 8 in here, and I think with the exception of one, we've sort of agreed on everything,
Yeah.
Rams fans will tar and feather me in a public square over the empty take. I expect that. So
you've been getting, I think what people don't understand is that you're a Rams fan. And I think everyone thinks you're a Rams hater. You're just a realist.
Narrative. And I was just thinking about it. I was like, every time it was sort of Rams Chargers head to head in our this or that, I picked against the Rams. So that narrative is only going to grow. And, I assure you it was sort of independent events here. But, I love the Rams. I'm a big Rams guy, but I try and be objective, and that's what we want at the LA Football Network. Yeah. But I mean, I know I don't want to turn into the Rams version of Skip Bayless over here, So
yes, you keep it real, which is good. You're a realist. So, all right, last one, and then we'll quickly give our faces of LA and wrap this thing up. Thank you all for tuning in. This is the LA Football Show. If you haven't already, make sure to text in LAFB to 31032 to join the debate and join the conversation with us. So, last one, back to college to wrap it up. And we're going to talk about transfer impact as we've seen a lot of transfers come into both USC and UCLA. Lincoln Riley brought a slew of transfers in. Chip Kelly has kind of been reborn as this new kind of transfer protege, that's how he builds his program. And when you look at the receiver position, and USC's had a lot of transfers in, but they obviously just got the former Biletnikoff winner in Jordan Addison. So on paper, the name, obviously everyone's going to lean that way. But when you look at impact within the offense, Jake Bobo, the transfer from Duke that comes in and will seemingly take the role that Kyle Phillips had, plus had a little bit more size, it's a better debate than people might think. So who do you think has the bigger transfer impact for their team?
You need to look at the impact. And we had a pretty extensive segment a couple of weeks ago on the Addison impact to USC in terms of kind of being that complete final piece to the passing game, where you've got the Kyle Ford tough yardage of 10 to 12 yards. You've got the home run, verticality threat in Mario Williams. And now Addison gives you everything in between to really stretch all three levels of the defense and stress them. However, having said all of that, and the fact that Addison is the reigning Biletnikoff winner, you still have Brendan Rice. You still have Taj Washington. You still have great players that are coming back. Gary Bryant Jr. So even if Addison gets into a little bit of a slump, I don't foresee that happening at all. God forbid Addison gets hurt. I hope that doesn't happen. You still have other receivers to come in and fill those holes and continue to be a prolific offense. On the other side of town, when you factor in the departure of Kyle Phillips, when you factor in the departure of Greg Dulcich, you're talking about the top two targets from UCLA leaving. And while you have Cam Brown and while you have Casimir Allen, the impact of Jake Bobo cannot be overstated, because he's a little bit of the Phillips in terms of getting those tough inside curls and those out routes at 10 to 12 yards. But he's a bigger, taller receiver, and he can sort of stretch the field more vertically than Phillips can. So he's actually sort of this hybrid combination between Phillips and Dulcich. And so when you factor in how much the defenses are going to be centering in on DTR and Charbonnet, Bobo having a big year is going to be really huge, so much so that he is preseason all Pac-12 second team without having even taken a formal snap in this particular conference. So for all of those reasons, Jake Bobo will mean more to UCLA in 2022 than Jordan Addison will mean to USC.
Well, we're going to wrap this segment up with us agreeing again, because I couldn't agree more. If we're looking at purely talent, the better receiver, potential better NFL aspirations, I definitely would lean Jordan Addison. But when you look within the scope of the offense, within the needs that the offense and these coaches will have, Jake Bobo is going to have to fill a role and some very big shoes, and will need to be called upon a lot on Saturdays, where Jordan Addison is a luxury. He's a piece that was added, as you said, is the final piece needed. But if he and I'm not even going to say with injuries or downplay, but just isn't utilized for 2 weeks in a row because other players are stepping up, USC's not going to miss a beat. They'll still put up 40 points because of all the talent. If Jake Bobo doesn't show up for 2 weeks at his 6'5" frame, as you alluded to, kind of fills that hybrid of Greg Dulcich and Kyle Phillips. And don't forget, Chase Cota also transferred out of this program. If he doesn't show up for 2 weeks and the defense is able to shut down Charbonnet, it could be tough sledding for this Chip Kelly offense to really move the football. He's going to be that important, this offense. And obviously there's been other transfers in as well that will have an impact. But Bobo is going to be the guy. And when it's said and done, he could be one of the top in terms of production and yards, just because of how much DTR in this offense will rely on him. Where Jordan Addison, I would not be shocked if he ends up having a 700-800 yard season. And that's not because he fell off. That's just because there's so many mouths to feed at the Coliseum.
Bobo is actually set up in a way for productivity in 2022, the way Addison was set up for productivity in 2021. And also to sort of tie it in from an LA football perspective, and hopefully I get some breadcrumbs back from some Rams fans. The analogy with Bobo in many ways is the analogy to Allen Robinson. If you look at Bobo last year at Duke, okay, ACC doormat essentially, as one of the only offensive weapons on that side of the ball for that program. Over 70 catches, nearly 1,000 yards, 10 touchdowns. Very similar to the type of productivity Allen Robinson put up when he was with the Bears, those early years with the Jaguars. So having to sort of, lift so much, I think Bobo is ready to sort of be the man in a situation where he is going to have more talent around him. It's not going to be the SC's receiving room, but the UCLA receiving room is no slouch either, and certainly a massive step up from Duke's receiving room. So I think for all of those reasons and factors, Bobo is not only set up in a situation to do more, he has done more, and I think he's ready to make that next leap in terms of national visibility.
Yeah, it's going to be fun to watch, fun to see how it plays out, and we'll see. We'll look back on this in a few months and see kind of how it plays out. But both players, both young men are set, I think, to have tremendous seasons, tremendous careers, and hopefully leave their stamp on this city of LA. So with that being said, Jamal, let's wrap the show up by quickly kind of talking about our current faces of LA. Let's just go with 5, I think, kind of the 5 guys that we see as the faces of LA football. When you are out and about, you recognize these guys. They're celebrities where they go. They represent their teams iconically. So I don't know if you want to go 1v1 or you want to just list 5, however you want to do it, but I'll toss to you.
Ryan, it's tough. I mean, I think that kind of there's some obvious choices here with Stafford, Donald, Cup, Herbert, Bosa. That sort of feels like where the 5 should be from a player standpoint. You could argue McVay and Riley are bigger stars than all 5 of those. Like if McVay and Riley walked down the street, I think that they would be more recognizable and more recognized by a crowd down Rodeo Drive, down Melrose, down Sunset, down Santa Monica, down, PCH than any of those 5 players, truthfully. And I think that's what makes it a very unique dynamic right now in the city, where we've got 2 teams. We've got some big time stars, but I don't know if any one of these players has sort of taken over the city in the way that Mahomes has taken over Kansas City, or Rodgers has taken over Green Bay, or Brady took over New England, or something to that level yet. And I think that's what makes it fun. I think if I just said sort of top 5 faces, I'd probably go McVay, Riley, Stafford. I'd actually go McVay, Riley, Cup, Donald, Herbert.
Yeah, I feel like I think we're going to be in agreement again. I don't know how we come to 5, but here's what I'll say about McVay and Riley. I've been covering football now for a while. I've always been just so in awe of the players, and I know idolize is a weird word nowadays, but in a sense, like, you grow up idolizing these players and you just look up to them, right, as heroes. And coaches were cool, but I could never care. But now that I've been, covering, I remember being on Radio Row and Lincoln Riley was there a day. I can't remember if I think he was there before you got there.
Yeah.
So you missed it. Yeah. But watching him walk by and the slew of crowd around him, and he walked right by our table. And I was just like we were with players all week, all these players, great players. Obviously the Rams were in the Super Bowl, so they weren't there, but I've met many Rams players and just the allurement of Lincoln Riley. And it like hits you like, oh man, this is like a big time star. So there's an example why he's up there. Being at OTAs and minicamp and seeing all the Rams players and brushing shoulders with essentially Aaron Donald and Bobby Wagner in the pit. And I remember taking a phone call after practice out in kind of the quad area, and McVay walks right by me and kind of gives me a nod. And that was like Sean McVay, let's go. Like that is what we're talking about when we're talking face of LA. So 100% agree, McVay and Riley, and I think Staley has a chance to get there as well, but it's only been a year and they have to start winning more. So McVay and Riley are there for me in no particular order. I'll probably pick McVay first just from our earlier conversation about that. And then, you got to go Herbert and Stafford, the 2 quarterbacks. Herbert is becoming the face of the NFL very quickly. I mean, he's close to supplanting Mahomes, as bizarre as that sounds, but the love for Herbert around the league nationally has grown so fast and so big, whether that's right or wrong, but it's grown very, very big, and credit to the Chargers for how they've actually marketed him. And kind of, I talked about it when the Chargers first moved here, is they need to get better at marketing their players to become the faces of LA. And they've done that with Justin Herbert. Matthew Stafford, immediately beloved when he came here. All of a sudden, some question marks when the Rams went on a little losing streak, rebounds, they win the Super Bowl. You can't have the winning Super Bowl quarterback not as a face in LA. I think he is that.
I don't have Stafford in my top 5.
Yeah, you don't. And for me, it's hard because obviously my last one is Aaron Donald. You can't not have the greatest football player in the universe. So that leaves Cooper Kupp off, who is very, very hard for me to leave off. But when you look at a casual fan, Cooper Kupp is beloved by diehard Rams, or beloved by Rams fans, is beloved by diehard football fans, is beloved by students of the game for what he brings from a mental aspect and also from a football aspect. But when you're a casual LA sports fan, Matthew Stafford, the quarterback of the Super Bowl winning team, even though Cooper Kupp won the MVP, even though he won the Triple Crown, if you're walking down by Crypto.com Arena, you're going to be much more recognizable of Matthew Stafford than Cooper Kupp, and that's just because of the position he plays.
Yeah, no, Ryan, I mean, it's a great point. And again, I think it's important to sort of ground the argument here is we're not saying who's better. We're just saying, who's got the biggest sort of star power. If they walk down the street, who's going to get the most buzz? Like if LeBron walked down the street, you're going to have that mob there. When Kobe was here, it was like that. Shaq. I mean, there's sort of levels to this. Even with kind of the Dodgers, I think if Mookie Betts walks down, I think there's going to be a ton of buzz, Clayton Kershaw and so forth. To me, I think we agree on the coaches. I think there's just a dynamic star power. I think Aaron Donald, not just because he's a great football player, it's obvious, but I think also just the charisma he showed at the parade with no shirt and all of that. I think that really upped his star power even more so as a result. I think Herbert, I don't think Herbert's there yet. Truthfully, I think he's beloved, but, I don't know if he's there yet, but we're assuming that's going to be the case in the next couple of months where he's going to have the mob. Where I actually think Kupp beats Stafford, just in terms of kind of the mob and the cult following, is I think Kupp, even in the parade, wearing the Mamba jersey and the OB, and, you have no idea what that means to this city. And when you do stuff like that, you're going to win a ton of fans right away. And, he had the swag with the glasses and all of that. I still think Stafford is he just kind of looks like a generic white guy, and it's just sort of, I don't know if Stafford, if he walks down the street, he's just going to get this kind of mob. He's sort of this unassuming guy, who maybe doesn't sort of have that same level of charisma as some of these other characters. So it's for that reason that I'd go Kupp over, but totally see the point on your end.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. It's with the Mamba jersey, that was huge at the parade. So, well, there you have it. Well, maybe we'll expand to 10 later on in the offseason when we're really stretching for things to talk about. But of course, in a episode where we're like, all right, what are we going to talk about? Here we are at an hour 15, and probably could have kept going if we wanted to. So, thank you all so much for tuning in. If you haven't, like I said already, join the conversation with us. Text LAFB to 31032. Love to hear your thoughts. And make sure to follow us on Twitter. I'm at Ryan Dyrud LAFB. The Madman at LAFB Jams with a Z. And the main account at LAFB Network. Jamal, my man, appreciate you as always. Thanks for the enjoyable conversation and insights as always.
Oh, likewise, Ryan. Always such a pleasure. I'll tell you, these summer episodes are so much fun because we can kind of get into all these different dimensions, and it's not just about X's and O's on the field and standings and what's to come and who's injured and who's putting up big fantasy numbers, which of course we live for all of that stuff, but it's fun to sort of explore some of these non-traditional topics. So always a pleasure to do this with you.
Exactly. Summer loving, right? Summer loving happens so fast, and here we are. But thank you all for tuning in. This is the LA Football Show. For Jamal, I'm Ryan. Enjoy your weekend. Stay safe out there. We do have, I guess we're still a week away from 4th of July. I'm getting ahead of myself, so we'll touch on that next week. But enjoy the weekend. We'll be back next Monday to talk again. Have a great one. Talk to you soon.